We continue the Shir in Sichos Haran, Seif Kuf Pei Gimel, paragraph 183. Arizal relates that one time Arizal came in and complained that he had some intestinal pain. He said, this is a sign. With this, he feels certain that he's going to receive money. This is a sign that portends the fact that he's going to receive money. And there is a hint to this from a posek in the Navi, which sort of combines the words intestines with money. So this is a sign for it. And that day, the mail brought money to Rabbi Nachman, which proved, money came in the mail, which proved that Rabbi Nachman was a prognosticator. He was able to foretell the future by this sign. Now, of course, what we have to understand what this statement is, that you have to be Rabbi Nachman to foretell something like that, because many times a person has an intestinal pain and he gets a bill in the mail instead of money. So you cannot really tell this as applying to everyone alike. You have to know the signs and know where to apply it and when. And of course, this ability, this is just a small sample showing the power of Rabbi Nachman and being able to see beyond the normal. So too, Rabbi Nachman said, the Fedish, openly, that when a person came to him, a person visited Rabbi Nachman, and he gave him his hand, a handshake. Just by touching his hand, holding his hand, Rabbi Nachman was able to detect, by this handshake, he could detect clearly and know fully the entire past of this person. Everything this person had experienced, or any sins he had committed in the entire past, his whole lifetime. His whole life, of course, means the entire past of his existence, because a person who is 30 years old or 40 years old is not just 30 or 40 years old. He could have been here in former Gilgulim. He could have lived for many hundreds of years. And knowing his past means knowing way back to the beginning of his origin. Just by shaking his hand, the man knows his entire past through to his origin. Everything that transpired on this person, what he had done and what he had gone through. And it says the posek yadli yadli yinakedo, hand to a hand, does not hide the evil that a person did. This is a hint from that posek. But the point the ability that Arizal had by detecting this of course is an act of a tzadik, the power of a tzadik. Because this is tantamount to reading a person's mind. No human being can read a person's mind. There is no such thing as a mind reader. There's no such thing as mental telepathy. That does not exist. We have people today who claim they have those powers, ESP and so on. We know definitely that is false, because the posek says b'fedish, Hashem said these words that Adam Roya Lo Einayim, Hashem Yireh Lalevav. A person can only see with his eyes, superficially. Only Hashem can see inside the person's heart, to read his mind and his heart, to know what the person is thinking, what he is doing, what has happened to him, and so on. Only Hashem has that power. This power Hashem gave to the tzaddikim. So the tzaddikim is damim liyetzah. The tzaddik reaches a level in which he has heavenly powers. But no earthly being, especially no ordinary person or lowly being, could ever have these powers. Chas v'sholom to believe in these items. Arizal said, though, that to detect the person's character, this can be detected by one who has a lot of wisdom, without being a great tzaddik, just by wisdom alone. With great deep chokhmah, it requires a very deep wisdom, to look at a person and to detect just by looking at the person alone. You can tell by looking at a person's eyes. If he has shifty eyes, he might be a thief, for example. Or he might have something in his eye. everything is possible. Or by a person's nose, this Rabbeinu said, looking at a person's nose, you can tell the extent of his tikkun habris. Because the nose, the chaytim, padashka, is begimatria, these 7 names of Hashem, Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, the 4 combinations of Sod, Mor-Bon, and Shem Ekia. This is begimatria Peidas, Bein Peidas Yesef. The 2nd chapter of the Kutam Arizal shows how the nostrils refer to the tzadik emes. So a person who's very wise, look at another person's nose and know to what extent he is a tzaddik. Now, of course, when we say a person is very wise, this means very deep wisdom. This requires deep wisdom of Kabbalah and not deep wisdom in Greek mythology. It's understood it requires a deep wisdom of that which is truly wisdom. So, Aharon said a person could tell if he's very wise, it means he must be very, very deeply learned. He must be a lamdan, otzum, muflag, extraordinary lamdan, though he is not a very holy tzaddik. So too, Aharon said that the chagura, the belt of a person, the gartel of a person, signifies the extent of the person's emunah, faith. It's important to know about this because now we know what it tells us. Because we cannot read what it says, at least we know it exists there. So a person should be careful about the way he puts on his gartel, in case some very wise person is looking at him, will be able to know what's going on with his emunah. But there are other simonim, and factually, Rosenfeld says there were many people who came to Arizal. He shook their hand and he related to them everything about their past. So this was a statement which he carried out to reality. And of course, there is the very famous story of the aristocrats that's brought in the Sefer Koch Ve'od, the 3 aristocrats, the leading aristocrats of Russia, who became befriended to Arizal. It's a very long story which we hope to have eventually. These 3 had tremendous power in the government. The Russian Tsar himself had placed them in a very high position, and they were very cynical as to the leading Hasidic rabbis. They were opposed to all of them till they met Arizal. They had the highest awe and respect for Arizal. Eventually, Arizal made them become religious to a complete extent. And of course, the rest of the story is a very fascinating one. But he won them over by first, as they walked in the first time, he told them something which was a secret to them. In other words, he had read their mind. They were surprised. They were shocked that it's possible to read their mind. Then said to them, at that time, it's nothing. There's no trick of mind reading. It's any person with little brains could tell by looking at the nose, the hands, the belt. So it's very simple. And they said, oh, that's what it is, not mind reading. When they walked out, they said to each other, we've been had. We've been taken. Because Arizal was so clever as to mislead them into telling them that you could tell by just looking at certain items. In truth, actually, it's the tzadik emes who has this power. So by even when we say telling about looking at certain things, the nose or the gartel or things like that, still takes the true tzaddik to detect, because no one can really tell about another person what's doing in his heart. There are some people who pretend to be tzaddikim, the Gemara says, and they are tzavua. They are false. They are frauds. They carry a banner of purity. Actually, they are evil. There are some people who seem to be very ordinary. Hiddenly, they are the greatest tzaddikim in the world. So this is something that no person can really tell except the tzadik emes who has this power. Aharon said too that he knows the origin of the neshamas, the origin of the neshama, the soul. The soul is older than the body. The body could be a few years old, a few decades old, but the neshama was created at the time of creation, or even before. And the origin of each neshama, as it goes through the different cycles, different gilgulim, different lifetimes, When Arizal sees, when he saw a person, he could look at the person and know the origin of his neshama, know exactly who this person was in every single gilgul, to know what type of neshama the person had. This, of course, is a very delicate topic, because the Arizal explains about the shoroshe neshamas, the roots of the person's neshama. For example, Adam Harishon was the composite form. He was one organism, one person. Actually, he was one person composed of 600,000 parts. Every one of the Jews had a place in Adam Harishon. One person could be a finger or a side. The Ramban, for example, was one of the payers of the Adam Harishon. So too, each person had a special place. Each neshama had a place there, depending upon the importance of the neshama, wherever that place was, in the different parts of Adam Harishon. So this, knowing the shadish, the root of the neshama, means then that by knowing this, Arizal was able to correct any imperfections that had come about and stains that had formed on the neshama through the person's misdeeds during the ages, during the different gilgul. Arizal said first that he knows every origin, every shadish of the neshamas from the Chumash, from the Navi, from the Tanakh. Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah. He knows the connection through the written Torah. Later on, he said that he now knows it also from the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah from the Gemara also, knowing the origin of each one. Therefore, by knowing how to give a tikkun, telling the person what to do, that would correct his neshama. Because you cannot give a general medicine, a cure-all for everyone. Each person's neshama needs a certain type of cure. Rosenfeld says what was unique about this was that generally the tzadikim who knew how to give a tikkun, as is brought, for instance, from the Arizal, tikkun he would give by telling the person to perform certain acts of Kabbalah, certain yichudim, using certain combinations of Hashem's name, very deep secrets of Kabbalah. By making these combinations, these sirufim, then the person would have his part of the neshama, which of course is also part of Hashem's name, would have it perfected. Arizal's means of perfecting of tikkun was not through Kabbalah. Arizal's tikkunim or by mitzvahs, maasiyos, telling the Jew to do certain acts, actual acts of mitzvahs, exactly what that person needed for his neshama. Rav Nosson shows examples. For example, one certain person, Rabbi Nachman would say to him, your tikkun is you must fast the whole week. You must fast from Shabbos till Shabbos. For 1 week, this would correct the imperfections in your neshama that you have caused throughout the different ages. Another person, he would say to him, you have to be awake. Stay awake 1 full night during the week. As we would on Shavuos night, every week select 1 night, and that night stay awake the entire night. This, of course, would be for a period of time. Eventually, Menzel would say, your neshama is perfected, you may now stop this. Another person, he would say to him that 1 day a week, 1 24-hour period, you are not to eat any kind of item that comes from a living being, which means no meat of an animal or no fowl, no birds, chicken meat or so on, or no fish too, which is anything that comes from anything that's alive. You have to eat only as a vegetarian would. Another case would be where you would tell a person to fast on Yom Kippur Katan, which is a custom by many anyhow. But this person was told that his tikkun depended upon it. Fasting Yom Kippur Katan means Erev Rosh Chodesh, the last day of the month, the day before the Chodesh. This person was told his tikkun depended upon that fasting. Or a person was told to go to the mikveh specifically on certain days, course it's a mitzvah to make it every day, still that person would have a tikkun by going on these certain days specifically. Or he would tell a person to learn 18 chapters, prakim of Mishnayos every day. This was actually a case of Rav Nosson Zal. Arizal told Rav Nosson Zal, your tikkun is to learn 18 prakim Mishnayos every day for a period of time until he told him to stop. This was a case where we note that each person required a different kind of a tikkun. Only that tzaddik emes who knew exactly what the neshama's roots were, knew what to give as a medication or a therapy for that neshama. You give each person different items to learn. One person was told to learn Gemara, one person was told to learn Yaakov, or Chumash, Tanakh, and so on. However, there were two things. Rabbi Nachman said, everyone must do these two things. There is no exception, regardless of what your neshama is, what your shedish is. These two things are alike for every one of the Talmudim, followers of Rabbi Nachman. One was the absolute chiyuv, the obligation of everyone to learn Shulchan Aruch every day. Not with a specified amount, but to learn a chapter, a paragraph, a page, anything. There must be some Shulchan Aruch learned every single day. That means 7 days a week, every day of a person's life. As he mentioned once, Rabbi Nachman gave a special mitzvah too. This was not part of this item, but general advised. Rabbi Nachman advised that whoever could should put a lot of stress on being zecher to put on the Benetam's tefillin in addition to Asher Kodesh tefillin. So since this too was Rabbi Nachman's advice, learning Shulchan Aruch should be done at a time when a person also fulfills Rabbi Nachman's advice. We combine the two. That's why it is very advisable, and how wonderful it is that we have that minhag here, that we learn Shulchan Aruch every day with the Benetam's tefillin on. We must make note to awaken, to arouse, to alert you to the fact, not to forget, chas v'sholom, that this is a 7-day rule. So on Shabbos, you've got to learn Shulchan Aruch too. Make sure that you cover some din in Shulchan Aruch. Though you don't have any times tefillin then, you know, we're tefillin then, but the law of Shulchan Aruch applies then too. This was the first item. The second item, Rabbi Nachman said, is a chiyuv. It is an obligation. It is mandatory. No one can evade this rule. No exception. Every single Jew must, 7 days a week, must have his Chassidus. In addition to the tefillos that you daven, shachris, mincha, and mariv, in addition to the brachas you say, in addition to the berkas hamazon, in addition to all these set pattern of tefillos you have in the siddur, the Chassidus means separate tefillos using your own words, privately, a private place where you're alone with Hashem. Speak to Hashem, pour out your heart to Hashem, tell Hashem your problems, because there is one case where you know you can be helped. There is no necessity to call for an appointment beforehand. There's no necessity to announce the fact that you are there. The second you open your mouth, the first word you say, Hashem is listening. No moment at all that you will say with having to fear that perhaps you're not being heard. Every word you say is heard. Hashem listens to every word of every mouth of every Jew. Berachamim, with kindness, with consideration, with compassion, with pity, with attentiveness, and with the will to help. This Chassidus is the holiest of all the possible uvdais, possible customs or habits that a person can acquire. This is the greatest treasure of all. Arizal stated very emphatically that the biggest tzaddikim that existed arrived at their highest level because of his Chassidus. This was the key to their greatness. Even Eliyahu Hanavi, the cave of Eliyahu Hanavi in Haifa, where he stayed for 40 days, Arizal arrived there, and Eretz Yisrael went straight to this cave. He stood there, and he said that he sensed, he could feel, experienced Eliyahu Hanavi standing there and having his bedrest before Hashem. How did he spend his time those 40 days? He spent his time on his bedrest, speaking privately to Hashem, and tefillos. That's what made the Hanavi so great. This is what made the Benazal become a Benazal. So therefore, this minhag, this act, this mitzvah is compulsory for every single Jew every day to have his bedrest, if possible, for 1 hour a day, if possible. A person cannot have 1 hour a day. He should not absent himself. He should have it as much as he could. If it's not an hour, if it's less than an hour, then have it less than an hour. Eventually, you will add to it, you get to the hour. There are some people who are zecher, different natures of course, but there are some people who have the ability, natural ability, to just speak, and the words just start pouring out, and even the tears come pouring out, and they can speak for 2 or 3 or 4 hours consecutively, without a pause. There are others who speak for 10 minutes and find difficulty in speaking. They're tongue-tied. They speak and they've completed their entire thoughts. The whole treasure of words has been exhausted after 10 minutes. When they speak to their friends about sports, they can sit there for hours on end without finding any shortage of what to talk about. When it comes to speaking to Hashem about spiritual problems, they find that they can't find words with which to express themselves, or they can't find thought. R Nosson says, I have advice for those people. One good word of advice. You must have a spiritus. It's for your good. It's a medicine you must take, because this is the medicine of life. Now, if you are the kind that finds difficulty in having a spiritus, you can't think of what to say. Hashem, help me. I need help. Please help me. What else? Good. And also you find difficulty in shedding a tear. The gates of tears are never locked. The gates of tefillah at times are closed. You cannot arouse yourself to a point of emotions where you would cry before Hashem. You cannot find words to say, and admit it, you feel badly about it. Nosson says that's the key to his prejudice. Right there, you begin crying and say, Hashem, why Lomani Gora? Why should I be the exception? Others have it so easy to speak to you. Why can't I have words to speak to you? Hashem, help me to have a spiritus. This is an item that the coldest heart, the least feeling, person with the least feeling, least emotion, could become aroused enough to actually cry before Hashem. Why should I stand here like a stone without being able to pour out any words that come from the heart when I need help so badly? Hashem, please help me. You give me the words to say. You help me to pour out my heart. You help me to speak with emotions. And when a person does that, he will find, without fail, that suddenly his mind becomes filled with thoughts. He's able to speak words. This is the greatest source of help. You need help, you go for his prejudice. You need help for his prejudice, go to the same source, speak to Hashem and say, Hashem, you help me to speak what I have to say. And this key is so simple, because even in regular tefillah, the first thing we say in tefillah, you come before Hashem, B'Shemon Esrei, we say, Hashem, Sfosai Tiftach. Hashem, you open my mouth, let words pour forth from my lips, Ufi Yagati Lasecha, and I begin to speak smoothly, praises of Hashem and requests that I have to make. This Indian of Asperitas, the Arizal said, is for every single Jew without fail, regardless of what your roots are. You might be a Shadish of an Neshama that is way up the top, biggest tzadik. You might be the very lowest person. You're all alike when it comes to Asperitas. Every person needs Asperitas because that is the breath of life, the life of the Neshama. So these two things, Shulchan Aruch and Asperitas, were alike for everyone. The other items, Rabbi Nachman selected for each person what his neshama needed, and after a while, Rabbi Nachman could detect that these persons were cured to a degree, and he would tell them to stop, or he'd give them a new sort of tikkun. He would change the items for them. Rabbi Nachman said, Rabbi Nachman stressed this final word: when I give a tikkun, and I tell you to do something, whether it is to learn a certain item, whether it is to fast a certain day, to do a certain mitzvah, or if it is something that's for everyone, learn Shulchan Aruch and have Asperitas. If you follow my tikkun that I give you, follow my advice, and know that this will help, this will perfect. It will perfect what? It will perfect your neshama, your soul. It will improve your life, not just the life at present, but your entire past. This is for your benefit, for your entire past during this lifetime and all past lives that you have lived. This is also not just for the past and present, it is for your entire future. For the rest of your life, and after a person passes away, this tikkun too will help. Know that when a person dies, he will not really die. If he obeys Arizal's advice, after he dies, this tikkun will help him then too. When Mashiach comes, this tikkun is made for that also. Because Mashiach comes, the Gemara says, not every person will live to see Mashiach. Will live at that time. What Tchias HaMesim afterwards, when the dead are resurrected and come back to life, then he will not come back to life. Then he will not be Zocher to live at that time. Arizal said, my tikkun guarantees you life. When Mashiach comes, guarantees you life, and Tchias HaMesim, dead come back to life, you're included. Have no fear. You will be one of those who come back to life with Tchias HaMesim if you follow my advice in this tikkun. Most important, you will be assured of the Osid Lovai, which means the real future, because all this is still speaking about a present, the present type of creation, present era. That's this creation we have now, which means the years of the world's existence until Mashiach comes, and then Tchias HaMesim, that'll come back to life. All that is part of the present creation. There will be an Osid Lovai, a future, a whole new type of existence, a whole new form of creation. But the Gemara says that Shmuel Hanavi, who was so great at tzadik compared to Menachem Mendel Schneerson, when he heard there was a trial coming up, he was frightened. Frightened because no matter how big a tzaddik is, even that great, is afraid of this Yosid Lovai. You might merit Gan Eden. You might merit Tchias HaMesim. Who knows if, when that trial comes, you might be excluded, Chas v'Shalom, from that new creation which is eternal. That Rabbi Nachman said, this tikkun I give you now will help even for them too. So great and far extending is the power of this tzadik emes, Rabbi Nachman. Not just himself. We'd say that tzadik emes is one who at least is assured himself being able to exist at that time. Something which Shmuel Hanavi was afraid of. Rabbi Nachman was big enough to not to fear he will live then. But much more than that, he said, not just myself, every one of my Talmidim who will listen to me, accept the tikkun that I give you, is assured that this tikkun will help you even then, to the furthest extent the furthest degree of the future, the Yosef Lovei also. Arizal says, therefore, they found that when they were told to do these things, they found it extremely difficult. When they learned by themselves, they could learn 50 chapters of Mishnayos a day. It was easy. When Arizal said, your tikkun is, follow what I say and learn 18 chapters of Mishnayos, suddenly it became so difficult, there were so many obstacles, so many difficulties that arose, that it seemed they were insurmountable. It was impossible to perform this, except through a Herculean effort which each person put into fulfilling the advice of Arizal. Everyone at that time was that close to Talmud, that dedicated, that everyone fulfilled Arizal's advice, his guidance. It was Zechel. But we see, Arizal says, nowadays, after Arizal's Stalkus, we have Arizal's advice still with us. We have Arizal's Sforim, Arizal's writings in Kutei Maran, and all his wise sayings, his teachings, and it is so difficult today for a person to learn Arizal's Sforim. You pick up a sefer and you find suddenly that you're very tired and you are sleepy and you are lazy and you have no time. On this sefer rests the weight of the Satan. He will do everything in his power to try to block a person from learning the words of this guide that is so potent, so powerful, to affect a tikkun for every person's neshama. That today too, we have to make every sacrifice, bend every effort, put every ounce of energy into a deep, firm resolve. No matter what happens, no matter what kind of maniyah we have, the worst maniyah is maniyah samoyach, where a person's mind becomes lethargic, very tired, so that you got. A person must battle this, fight like a lion. Strength of a lion, to awaken, to rouse himself, to learn Arizal's Sforim, and to fulfill his words of advice, knowing that the reason why it is so difficult is only because Arizal is called the Oir HaNe'elam, the hidden light. That light is hidden, it's covered by the shadow of the Satan, by the shadow of the evil that exists in the Snagdim, the world who are opposed to the greatness of Arizal, who try to hide his greatness and his light. And ashrei to those who are zecher to attach themselves to see this light despite the darkness, who see this light through the darkness, and who fulfill the words of advice of Arizal. Go through life with the zbedidus every day, with the solid, implicit emunah, unquestioning faith in Arizal and in his teachings. Arizal says there are many times that Arizal revealed the future, power of a navi, to foretell the future. That is one who possesses power of miracles, miracle performer. One time, there was a sort of a disease that struck. Arizal foretold this, there would be this kind of a sickness that would strike before anyone had an inkling of it. Before, of course, the doctors had the slightest idea about it. They didn't know it was there even when it came. Arizal foretold this in advance, knowing the future. Second instance was a case where there was prices rose to a very high, unusual, abnormal degree, and they remained very high for a year's time. At the end of that year, people expected that prices would finally fall. There'd be a decline in prices. Arizal foretold the fact this high price level would continue for a second year, would not decline at the end of the first year, and that's what happened. However, Arizal says that this was not Arizal's common tactics. He was opposed to the principle of performing miracles. There are certain tzaddikim who are known, and for some as Baalei Mosen. They're famous for the miracles they perform. Arizal said this is not his affair. He does not participate, he does not confine himself or care to indulge in showing off our miracles, because to him it's very simple. Performing miracles is a very simple act. But that's not his affair. Once in a while, just for the sake of Chassidut, to show at least for those who want, at that time he did show some miracles performed, but very rarely. The reason was why in that time, in that era, that other tzaddikim show their greatness in performing miracles, while Arizal refrained, because Arizal's service was at a much higher level. His miracles were performed with live people. Take a human being who possesses the greatest power on earth. What is the greatest power on earth? Koyach bechira, free choice. Human being, ordinary mortal, has the power to go against his creator. Hashem gives an order, a command, a mitzvah, and this lowly mortal is given the power to refuse to adhere to this mitzvah. That koyach bechira is something that is so great a power that it's the most difficult thing to overcome. This was Arizal's greatness. He was able to persuade, to influence a person with this power of choice to follow Hashem's bidding, to make that person do tshuva, elevate that person to a level of being an Oved Hashem. That was during Arizal's lifetime and subsequently to this day. Those who are close to Arizal know, those who follow Arizal's teachings know that if not for Arizal's teachings, it would have been very, very much lower or lost. Arizal's teachings are that great, that powerful, that effective, even very low type of people who have very little kedusha, holiness in them, are drawn and are given the inspiration by the Arizal's words to bring themselves up to a higher level of kedusha and avodas Hashem. This is the zechus of being close to Arizal. Arizal tells one case, instance of it. He said very rarely Arizal performed a miracle. There's one specific case that is told for a reason. One of the rare times Arizal performed an open miracle. Arizal was sitting at the table on a Shabbos together with his Talmidim, and a man entered. This man was one of Arizal's Talmidim also, who had been sick for a while, and he suffered with his arm. His arm was in a sling. For a long time, the arm was completely useless. He could not move the arm at all. He suffered tremendously. The pain was practically unbearable, and there was no way he could find a cure for it. Plus, there were expensive type of medicines, applications which he could not afford. So, to him, the arm was useless. He could not lower it. It was in a sling. He cannot lower the arm at all. He cannot move it whatsoever. He stood there. Arizal said to the students around him, "This man, would you testify that he has true emunah?" And they all replied, "Yes, we would." Arizal repeated this again. And he stressed this again and again. Each time the Talmidim said, "Yes, definitely, this man has definite emunah, emunah in Hashem, emunah in the tzadik, emunah in the Torah." A definite confirmation of this fact. After a pause, Arizal suddenly issued an order. He said to this man, "Lower your arm." The man was frightened, taken aback. Everyone there was aghast, because it was so unusual an order. This man had been sick for so long that it was impossible for him to move the arm, and now he was told to lower it suddenly. As soon as Arizal said that, then they removed the sling, the bandage, which held his arm close to his neck. He immediately lowered the arm and found that it was completely cured. The pain was gone. The arm was perfectly normal. And this was a miracle that was witnessed by a large number of people. There was no question, no way this could be denied, because the people there knew of this man's suffering. They knew the fact that his arm was immobile. They knew that this arm was diseased. Until that moment before, there was no question about the authenticity of this miracle. They were all witness to a meifus performed by Rabbi Nachman. This was one of a few miracles Rabbi Nachman performed, done at rare instances, but Rabbi Nachman says that he came to Rabbi Nachman after this happened. Rabbi Nachman spoke to Moshe about this. Rabbi Nachman was suffering at the time. He was ill. He said that every time he does an act like this, sort of a miracle, and he has Yisurim afterwards, he suffers. And each time he does this miracle, he always davens to Hashem, let this item be forgotten, because it's not his will to have this publicized. He should be known as a miracle tzadik, one who performs miracles. He wants this to be forgotten. But at times, as we said, rarely he did perform miracles, very rarely, at least in ratio compared to other tzaddikim. He avoided this. He shunned this act. This is the story that Arizal brings here. We once mentioned the sequel to the story, where a few days later, Arizal was sitting with his Talmidim, and he said to them always the question, what is new? What is going on out in the world? And Talmidim answered, they replied to Arizal, they said, there is a lot of commotion outside. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of excitement. The whole world, that means that whole area, community, the city, is discussing the miracle that occurred. They're all very excited over the fact there was a miracle that took place in the city. They're all discussing it very animatedly. They're excited about it. Menachem said, that's not for me. That's not my way. This business of a miracle and publicizing it, that's there. Other tzaddikim will do that, but this is not my custom. It's not my habit. It's not for me. This is not Breslov. Short time later, Rabbi Nachman said, what's new today? What's going on? Talmidim answered, we're sorry to report that there's a lot of discussion going on in the city. People are talking. What are they saying? They're all speaking of the fact that they suspect this whole miracle story was a fraud. The whole thing was a setup. It wasn't even real. The man's arm was not diseased. There was no sickness. The entire thing was a plant. It was a pretense to show the performance of a miracle for the sake of publicity, for the sake of gaining fame. So they're all speaking in a negative manner against Rabbi Nachman, in a very derogatory manner. Rabbi Nachman is speaking about it, not the miracle performer, chas v'shalom, very low form. Rabbi Nachman replied, that's me. That's my life. Have me publicized as a great miracle performer with praises. That's not me. This is my way. That's my opinion. This is my characteristic. This is the Eid HaNeva, the hidden light. That before Mashiach comes, you'll very rarely find someone speaking in a complimentary form, praising Rabbi Nachman's greatness, because the Satan is out to shadow this, to hide this. So, if Rabbi Nachman did perform a miracle, he would inject into their minds a skepticism, a doubt as to whether this was real. That Rabbi Nachman said is Breslov. But remember that Rabbi Nachman said, this I assure you, that we are the true Tiferet in the true beauty of the Jews. But our beauty, our greatness, will become known, will come to light when Mashiach comes. And everyone will finally see that the truth, the greatness, was the light of the tzadik emes of Breslov. Ashrei to those who are niskasher Arizal before this time, because when Mashiach comes, they can hold their heads up proudly and say, we knew this before, we held this before. We should be zecher to be emes, be niskasher, the tachlis amunah Arizal, to follow implicitly the words, the guidance, the teachings of Arizal, and that's, of course, we should see with our eyes the coming of Mashiach. Amen.
We continue the Shir Sichei Sanan, Seif Kuf Peches. Benazal sayings, paragraph 188. Benazal said that when a person comes to him with a pidyon means some money to redeem his soul. One is very ill, has to show him he wants to be certain he can ransom to win his life from the Malach HaMaves or from a sealed fate in heaven, chas v'shalom. He makes a pidyon nefesh. He buys back his soul by giving the necessary amount of money to the tzadik emes, and then brings this pidyon to the heavenly court. We discussed that in detail previously. Benazal says that when a person comes to the Benazal with a pidyon for someone who is very ill or someone who is in deep trouble, somebody who's suffering very much, whether it's business, finances, enemies, chas v'shalom, any other kind of problems, Benazal said that he actually experiences the same pain as the person who is suffering. In other words, his sympathy is so sincere and so deep. He feels with that person every drop of pain and suffering that person endures, and even more so. He feels more the pain than the other person. The other person who's suffering could sometimes let his mind wander away from this problem. Arizal feels with him, he sympathizes to such an extent that he cannot let his mind wander. His mind concentrates on the suffering of this Jew, and he endures the pain and suffering just as much as that person, and even more. And I'll say that this is not simple. To really, honestly feel the pain of a fellow Jew when you yourself are in good circumstances, so a difficult item. You imagine that you sympathize with the person, you cluck your tongue, and that's it. To really feel that you too are suffering because of that person's problems and troubles, that takes the high madrega. And therefore, Arizal said that he could not get himself to really feel this sensation until he was mamish mispalot to Hashem. He davened very hard to Hashem. He should be zecher to feel the actual pain and suffering of the person who's got this problem. Arizal said too, one time there was one of the Arizal's Talmidim asked the Arizal, begged the Arizal, since he was leaving for a while, Arizal was leaving, or the Talmud was leaving him, he said he begged him that Arizal should not forget him. Keep him in mind. Arizal said, looked at him in amazement and said, how can I ever forget any one of you, any one of my Talmidim? Every one of you Talmidim of mine has a separate place within my heart. Arizal's heart was large enough, big enough to contain every single one of his Talmidim, and at no time would Rabbi Arizal forget any one of his Talmidim. He'd keep them in mind constantly. This was said then. Obviously, this statement is meant for the future too. That even after Rabbi Arizal's Estalkus, Rabbi Arizal's heart is still the same. Within Rabbi Arizal's heart there is still enough room to keep all of his Talmidim, past, present, and future. That anyone today who is honestly devoted to, dedicated to Rabbi Arizal's teachings, and is truly mekusher attached to Rabbi Arizal, and without any doubt whatsoever, Rabbi Arizal surely has this Talmud in mind. Anyone today who is a Breslover, the emes, that person can know that Rabbi Arizal is fully aware of his existence, his being, and is very much concerned with him, concerned with every move that he makes, every aliyah and yeridah, as he has an ascent, as he rises in religion, improves in the study of Torah and davening. This brings simcha to Rabbi Arizal. And as he has a descent, a yeridah chas v'sholom, every time that he drops, it causes actual pain to Rabbi Arizal in heaven. So this at least is a very important consolation, very happy thought, to know the value of being attached to Rabbi Arizal, that we are not non-entities. We actually exist. The name, we are very clearly identified by Rabbi Arizal himself. That's why he said Rabbi Arizal, knowing each one clearly, is the only one, obviously, who dictates, who decides those who will really become close to him. The most important venture of all, greatest zechiyah possible for any Jew, is to get to Rabbi Arizal's seer in an ummah. But to get there, it takes a lot of schusim. A lot of tefillah is schusim. And then, of course, there are always manias, always barriers and obstacles that come up. Many who have attempted it and have failed because of these barriers and obstacles. Many who are adamant. They continued again and again until they made it. Now, it's not the obstacle itself. It's not the lack of money. It's not the government there that stops a person. It's not the lack of transportation. It's not the weather. It is only the consent of Rabbi Arizal. Rabbi Arizal is the one that decides and determines who will get the seer. And this, of course, depends upon the sincerity of the person's faith in Rabbi Arizal. How well he believes in Rabbi Arizal, how well he abides by Rabbi Arizal's words and teachings, and above all, how much the person is mevatel himself. Destroys any trace or vestige of gaiva, of self-esteem. The person is mevatel himself and says truly that I am not important, I'm only a cog, I'm only a part, a small part attached to the tzadik emes. That person then truly becomes bottled to the tzadik emes himself, becomes part of the tzadik emes, and that person surely receives the consent of Rabbi Arizal to get to the tzion, which is the ultimate aliyah. So in a word, we should find very deep satisfaction in the knowledge that Rabbi Arizal has us deeply in mind and permanently, those who are true Talmidim. Arizal tells a story at one time. Rabbi Arizal's grandchild was very ill, was bedridden, a young grandchild bedridden with smallpox, R Nosson. And Rabbi Arizal spoke to Rav Nosson, bemoaned the plight of this child, and spoke about his great degree of suffering. Rabbi Arizal felt so much suffering, so much pain. He felt every drop of pain that this child felt. He experienced each pang of pain that comes with this type of illness. Arizal said that it's impossible for a person to understand the secret ways of Hashem. You cannot fathom the complex heavenly reasoning. There are questions that cannot be answered. Because, for example, the Arizal, the Ariya Kodesh, had a son who passed away. Arizal said that this son was nostalgic for only one reason. Because in the Torah there are sedus, there are secrets. There is Torah Shebenigla, the revealed Torah, Torah Shebenista, the hidden Torah, which means the Kabbalah. In Kabbalah there are certain secrets that are unknown. Even if you read the Kabbalah Sforim, you learn the Zohar Kodesh, or the Kabbalah Sforim, you will see words, but you will not know what secret is hidden in them unless you have someone to reveal these secrets. The Zohar Kodesh without the Kisvei Arizal is a blank sefer. It's impossible to understand it. Understand the meaning of some of those words. Arizal came was Megale revealed these secrets. Now, Arizal said that his son was nostalgic because of one single secret that Arizal revealed to his main disciple, his chief Talmud, Reb Chaim Vital. Because he revealed this secret, therefore his son died. That was a punishment. That was the result of revealing a secret. Of course, the Zohar Kodesh says it. If an item is a secret, it must be kept a secret. It's a sin to reveal it. Arizal did reveal the secret. The secret was a statement in the Zohar Kodesh about one of the terms, terminology used there. Arizal explained what this term meant, and for this, his son passed away. This is something that's impossible to understand, because after all, did Arizal do something wrong by revealing this secret? Chaim Vital begged him to reveal this. Chaim Vital begged Arizal to reveal this secret, and Arizal was forced to reveal it. He was born, he came to this world with one mission. Ariya Kodesh's mission was to teach Reb Chaim Vital everything that he wanted to know. That was the purpose for his coming to this world. So fulfilling that purpose, doing what he came for, fulfilling the mission, which was his primary mitzvah, for that, his son passed away. That's paradoxical. How can we explain that? Arizal said this is something that's impossible to explain. These are the secret, mysterious ways of heaven. There's no way to explain this. What was meant by it was referring to himself. Arizal endured a tremendous amount of pain and suffering himself because of illness, the suffering with his children. Arizal had two sons, both passed away in their infancy, suffering in the health of the rest of his children, his daughters, his grandchildren. Why all this suffering? Because of the fact that Arizal was working, striving to bring close his Talmidim to Avodas Hashem, to serve Hashem. Now that was Rabbi Arizal's purpose in coming to this world. His mission in life was the Mikadev Lechokim, to bring close Jews who were distant from Avodas Hashem, bring them close to Hashem, in order to enhance, to beautify Mikadesh L'Shem Shemayim. That was his mission, and despite this, he had such a tremendous degree of yisurim, of suffering, because of mysterious ways of heaven that cannot be explained. Arizal said that as far as this grandchild was concerned, who was suffering so much pain, the smallpox illness, that he would have liked to have taken the entire illness upon himself, because every moan, every groan that the child makes, Rabbi Arizal could feel within his heart. He could feel every pang of pain there. Arizal said that this can be counted to my credit. The fact that it's not just my own grandchild that I have this feeling for, but every single Jew comes to me with a figuring, who asks me to daven for him, I feel the pain and suffering of that Jew too. Especially what hurts most deeply, the Ben Arizal said, is when one of my followers drops, he falls away, he becomes estranged. That's the worst type of pain. That's obvious because it's like a person who gives birth. The Gemara says that by being a kiruv someone, it's like giving birth then. A Talmud is like a son or a daughter. That's the same thing. Talmidim are like children, even more. The Gemara says two Lashonos. It's like having given birth and like having created them. They were non-existent, they were created. That's how close the Talmud is. And therefore, when a Talmud becomes estranged, it's like a person who has a child who dies, who passes away. Imagine the pain and suffering, the hurt and feelings that come about then. This Ben Arizal is the type of suffering that he has, but one of his Talmidim drops away. Also, one day, when the Ben Arizal's child, Moshe Feinstein, was nostalgic, he also mentioned this fact that he has so much yisurim, all because of his own Talmidim, because he strives so hard in the kiruv and to bring him close, therefore he has all this yisurim. Imagine that Ben Arizal said that the Arizal revealed only one single secret. That Chaim tells him, therefore his son died. He had such a punishment. How much more so, Ben Arizal does so many things, reveals so many secrets to his Talmidim, such tremendous secrets. Take one, for example, the Tikuney Zohar, the secret of the 10 chapters of Tehillim, which is a secret that all tzadikim in the past strived so hard all their lives to discover. Ben Arizal was the one who discovered it and revealed it. That's just one of so many. The Sipuri Maisies. All the rest of the secrets that so mysteriously bring Jews to a point where they begin to feel themselves vibrant and alive again. Ones whose souls were actually dead. They come to life. This is Tchias HaMesim, secret of Tchias HaMesim. Ben Arizal revealed so many secrets to his Talmidim. Therefore, Ben Arizal said, how much more so do I have suffering, all because of you Talmidim for whom I work so hard. Why is this? Why should I suffer if I am accomplishing a mission that's so vital and so sacred? This is a question that cannot be answered. These are the secrets of heaven. We must accept them, the emunah shlema. Whatever it is certainly for the good. It's not for us to ask, it's for us to accept. Ashrei to those people who have that degree of emunah, where no questions are asked, and they say, Gamzu b'teva, everything from heaven is done for the best. Naturally, these questions will be answered when a person gets to heaven. Then he'll smile and see how foolish it was to have had any slightest doubt whatsoever about the ways of heaven. Because the ways of Hashem are always righteous. Ikar is, a person should base his life on that pure emunah. Ben Arizal said many times he imagined himself, tried to bring himself to picture the actual feeling, the actual case of death, as though he actually had died, or at least the process of dying, until he was able to really experience the process of dying and death. He told also that when he was very young, as a child, he tried to picture how his death would take place, what it would be like, how they would mourn his passing, all the different details that pertain to death. And the Ben Arizal said it's a very difficult item to be able to accomplish this. Of course, that this goes much deeper. The person who is zecher to that can be zecher to really say Kriya Shema b'Mesidus Nefesh Mamish. The person who say Kriya Shema Yisrael, as though he is dying for the sake of his religion, to get credit as though he actually is giving his life for the sake of emunah. this Rabbi Arizal accomplished when he was very young. Rosenfeld tells one time Rabbi Arizal entered into the house. He spoke up and said these words: "There is a problem. What should a person do when before him there stands a tall mountain? This mountain is a mountain of fire. It's a tall mountain of fire in front of him. On the other side of the mountain there lies a very precious and desirable treasure, greatest treasure conceivable. But it is impossible to get to this treasure unless one goes right through this mountain of fire. Only way to get to that treasure by going a straight line directly through the center of that mountain of fire." Now, the problem is multiplied because a person cannot say, "No problem, I won't go through the mountain of fire, I'll do without the treasure." This is impossible. The person must get to that treasure. He doesn't have any choice in this matter. He must get to that treasure, a desirable treasure, and the only way to get to it is through that mountain of fire. These are the words that Rabbi Arizal spoke then, and that was it. A few days later, again, Rabbi Arizal spoke about this. He smiled, he laughed, and he said, "I've already found the answer to this question. What to do in this case?" And that's the end of this paragraph. This is one of the most mysterious sayings yet. I've never found an explanation of this paragraph yet, anywhere. Surprisingly, however, it is permissible for a person to attempt to interpret this. I once mentioned what I felt was a clear, true interpretation of this paragraph, or at least one of possibly a few. But what is very clear is that this interpretation would fit perfectly the kavanah, the intention in these words. And it would solve this problem too. It would define the terms used here. Especially, it's a story within a story. Note that the wording is, besides the problem, Rabbi Arizal entered and spoke. Later, Rabbi Arizal smiled, laughed, and gave the answer, and said that he had the answer. Why are those words added? Well, this, obviously, it seems, is based on a fact the Gemara speaks about. The Gemara tells us that when Mashiach comes, after Mashiach's coming, there will be, of course, a celebration. Why not? The biggest event possible, the coming of Mashiach. At the same time, there will also be a memorial meeting, a very sad assembly of all Jews, where all Jews will mourn and cry. This is what the posek says in the Navi, Zechariah. At the time of Mashiach's coming, all Jews will assemble to mourn and to cry. And the Gemara says Mashiach will come. Why should they mourn and cry then? That should be the happiest occasion possible. The Gemara answers there are two reasons. One, because they will mourn the death of Mashiach ben Yosef. The first Mashiach ben Yosef, they'll mourn his death. The posek says they will mourn the body who was slain by a sword. That's the wording. This body slain by a sword, this mourning period, for whom is this? Mashiach ben Yosef will be killed in the battle just before Mashiach ben David comes to take over and rule as king. Second definition, the reason given to this posek is, the reason for mourning will be that tzaddikim and rishonim will assemble together. In front of their eyes, Hashem will take the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, and he will shecht. He will slay the Yetzer Hara, and there they will cry when they will see this body slain. Why will they all cry? The Gemara says tzaddikim will cry because in front of their eyes there will appear this apparition. What will the Yetzer Hara look like? What will the Satan look like? Like a giant-sized mountain. Why will they cry? They'll cry and say, how could we ever have been able to overcome a mountain like this in our time? We never succumbed, we never surrendered to the schemes, the wiles, the attacks of this Yetzer Hara. How could we have defeated this giant-sized mountain? They'll cry it. The Rishonim will see this Yetzer Hara, and to them he'll appear as a thin strand of hair. And they'll cry and bewail the fact that all their lives they gave in to this tiny little hair. They couldn't overcome the taivas, the desires of something that is so weak and so slight. For this they have to lose their Gan Eden. This they have to go to Gehenna for because of something that's so infinitesimal. For this the Rishonim shall cry. And this is what's meant by, we speak about Hashem will send the Jews to inherit Esav Hadasha. A Malach of Esav is the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, and his place, inherit his place is called Har Seir. Har Seir, combination of Har, a mountain as far as tzaddikim are concerned, Seir, a hair as far as the Rishonim are concerned. This will be inherited, will be destroyed and wiped out. These are a combination of both. Tzaddikim he appears as a mountain, to the Rishonim he appears as a hair. We can understand why the Rishonim will cry. Of course they'll cry. This, they were so foolish they couldn't see the light. They're so tiny an item. They had to give away their whole future life. Chas v'sholom. There's a lot to cry about. But why should tzaddikim cry? You could see they're being amazed at the tremendous size of this Yetzer Hara, this Malach, this powerful angel. Fine. But they should be overjoyed. Despite the greatness of this angel, they still were able to succeed in defeating him. This is a joy. Look at the reward they have now. The answer is, Mepharshim say that tzaddikim will cry because they will see this mountain and they'll realize that in truth they did not defeat this mountain. It wasn't their act. Gemara says no matter how much a person tries, how hard he strives to overcome the Yetzer Hara, this angel, this archangel, but not for the fact that Hashem helps the tzaddikim, then surely he truly fall victim to the Yetzer Hara. He's not strong enough. The Yetzer Hara is too powerful and too great. So therefore tzaddikim will cry. The Gemara finishes with the word the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Tamar. Hashem too will wonder with tzaddikim who marvel, however, Ini Hashem Yipolei. The eyes of Hashem will also be a wonder how could they have overcome this mountain. What is the meaning of that last sentence? The answer is that tzaddikim will be very worried, will be afraid. How can they overcome this tall mountain? Mountain of this fiery evil. Yetzer Hara is a malach shel eish, a mountain of fire who seeks to destroy, to inflame, to arouse a person's heart with sin. How could a tzaddik have been able to overcome this mountain? Obviously, he didn't. It was the help of Hashem. In that case, he doesn't deserve reward. He's lost out. All his battle during his lifetime was in vain. It's the credit of heaven, not his own. The person does not get credit unless he works for it. He didn't earn this. It's unearned schar. Then the Gemara says, Hashem will marvel with tzaddikim. Hashem will console tzaddikim and say, don't worry. I also marvel at your greatness. it's not only the act of Hashem, it's the greatness of tzaddikim who are able to overcome this Yetzer Hara. Because true that without the help of Hashem, they could not have defeated the Yetzer Hara. However, the Gemara says, whom does Hashem help? If one comes to purify himself, if one attempts, gives his utmost to defeat the Yetzer Hara, then does Hashem help them to be victorious. So Hashem marvels at the efforts of the tzaddikim, how much sacrifice they put into this, and how they ultimately defeated the Yetzer Hara. Which means that Hashem will accede, given to the tzaddikim the right that they have fully earned the credit, the reward that is due them. In this case, we can see Arizal's question was, in order to get to that desirable treasure, what desirable treasure? The only treasure that is really, truly a treasure is one that is eternal, one that's everlasting, which means the heavenly life in Gan Eden. In order to get that Gan Eden, there is no way except to go through, to do battle the Melchemes HaYetzer. You must battle the Yetzer Hara. You cannot get to Gan Eden without that battle. It must be by going through this mountain of fire. A person who succeeds to him, a person who really attempts it to him, this is a mountain. A mountain of fire, this Yetzer Hara, the Satan, and to battle this mountain, to get through to the other side, how can a person do it? Arizal asked this question, obviously, very sadly. It was the same as the tzaddikim who cried, how can we overcome this mountain? Note that later the Arizal came and laughed. Hashem said, tzaddikim, stop crying. Dry your tears, because I am with you. I console you with the fact you don't have to cry, you can rejoice that you have fully earned this. Arizal smiled and laughed and said, now it has become known to me the answer to this question. Hashem himself reveals the answer and says, despite the fact that Hashem helps, it's only to those who have strived their utmost and who have fully deserved and earned and merited the reward that is due. Therefore, they smile in happiness. This is the answer to the question of the tzaddikim. And this, of course, teaches us a lesson too, that these tzaddikim who are great enough to actually defeat the Satan, to bring about his demise, his end, imagine the good fortune of those who are mekusha b'emes to these tzaddikim. They can cling to the tzaddikim who will help them in this battle against the Yetzer Hara. We are very tiny in a battle against so gigantic a mountain of fire. What chance do we stand? But when we go behind, attached to the tzaddikim, we are then immune. We become immune to this fire. We can go through this mountain of fire and can actually reach the other side to this tremendous treasure. We should be zeichet to maintain that degree of emunah in tzaddikim and thereby be successful and victorious in this. Rosenfeld tells that one time he was speaking to Rabbi Nachman. He said to Rabbi Nachman, it's strange that there are people living then. Imagine this was said then, how much more so it holds true today. People living then who refused to accept, to believe that there are great tzaddikim living at that time, as there were in former generations. People believe that there are great tzaddikim in the past, Tanoim, Aharon, time of the Gemara, a little later, but at this late date, which is only about less than 200 years ago, this was over more than 200 years after the Arizal, it was after the passing of the Baal Shem HaKadosh. People said there are no more great tzaddikim alive, they do not exist anymore. The era of tzaddikim is finished. This, R Nosson said to Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman stated very emphatically, you must know this as absolute. If one believes in Hashem if, and he must simultaneously believe that there are tzaddikim also. Because the two go together. Tiferes and Yesod Chadhu. Hashem and tzaddik are one. They are inseparable. They cannot exist one without the other. Just as Hashem surely, unquestionably exists, so too there are tzaddikim surely in every generation. Rosenfeld says, understand this very, very deeply. Don't ever let this stray from your mind. Whenever a person has doubts, that's for sure. He says we learn in the Gemara, we learn in history about the miracles these great tzaddikim performed, about how holy they were, how sanctified. Where do you find such individuals in our time? The person that has that germ of doubt in his mind, stop, think, understand the words of Arizal. In those days, in those generations, there was Hashem. Hashem existed. In this generation, the same Hashem continues to exist. Hashem is Hoya, Hoyve, V'Yihya, past, present, and future. And just as positive as in those days there were tzaddikim with Hashem, so too in our time and at all times there are tzaddikim. As sure as the existence of Hashem, so too is the positive existence of a tzaddik. Because the world can exist only on the foundation of the world, which is the Yesod, Tzaddik Yesod Olam. The difference is only that in certain times tzaddikim are revealed. They are more revealed, they are more seen than other times. At other times tzaddikim are more nala, they're hidden. The light is hidden. They don't show themselves or reveal themselves. The fact is that tzaddikim exist at all times. To illustrate that even deeper, if we go back honestly, Rosenfeld says that, let's say today, what would the reason for this claim be, for this question? People will say, you have tzaddikim today, show me one today who could divide the waters of the Red Sea. Show me a Moshe Rabbeinu. If you cannot, at least show me a David HaMelech. At least show me a Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Show me one of those and I'll accept. The answer is that this word show me existed in those days too. Even in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, when it would seem to anybody that there was no question of doubt, is there a tzaddik in that generation? Could you ask for better? The fact is that a large portion, a great percentage of people at that time who were very learned too and religious still rebelled and disbelieved in the tzaddik emes at that time. People turned away from Moshe Rabbeinu and revolted against him. You want a tzaddik emes? What's better than the Raya Nehemna, the greatest tzaddik of all time? You cannot be born in any generation where you'll have a bigger leader, a bigger tzaddik than you have at that time. And still, at that time, there were those who turned away. So that question existed then too. Give us a leader. Korach said, we want a leader. Who? Not the one we have. We want a leader. We do not have a leader that is, we could consider a tzaddik emes. And so too many others rebelled from Islam. This same thing went on in every single generation. To say today, for example, if we only would have one like the Shemtei living today, would there be a problem of a tzaddik emes? Everyone would say there exists a tzaddik emes today, a very holy tzaddik. We have stopped the need for searching any further. We're all satisfied. Are we all satisfied? You think that we today are wiser and more learned And the people living in the generation of the Baal Shem Tov, that was a generation that was packed with B'nai Torah. The average person then, was far more learned than the biggest ge'onim of today. Far more learned. The simplest person then knew much more Torah than the wisest men of today. And yet those, not simple people, but the advanced people, the leaders then, rebelled against the Baal Shem Tov to the extent where they said, where is a tzaddik today? We don't see any. All was known to them, the Baal Shem Tov's light was completely dark. Those people who were so learned and so advanced, the light of the Baal Shem Tov was completely unseen. So we see then, therefore, that at no time can we say honestly, if we had this tzaddik or that tzaddik, we'd be satisfied. In each generation there definitely exists tzaddikim. One who does not feel it, one who does not believe it, one who does not see it, is because that person's neshama is too dark to receive the light of the tzaddik emes in that time. That person's neshama lacks the true receptacle for this light. What is the receptacle to receive the light? Emunah tzaddikim. A person has emunah tzaddikim, he'll see the tzaddik emes. He'll realize, he'll feel his existence. If one doesn't have the emunah, he will not get to see it. Without emunah, it's impossible, no matter when you live, no matter what generation, no matter who the tzaddik emes of that time is. So therefore, the key to understanding, to knowing about the tzaddik, which definitely exists, just as sure as Hashem exists, is to believe that there is such a tzaddik. The words of the Arizal is, if a person believes in Hashem, tzrichim lahamen, he is compelled, he is forced, he must believe that there are also tzaddikim. He must believe that there is no other alternative. If he does not believe that, his faith is weak, his faith is worthless. Then again, we learn too, any person, no matter when or where, a person who says that he truly, honestly believes in Hashem, he states that with the firmest statement of faith. But he says he does not believe in tzaddikim, and not only is his emunah in tzaddikim lacking, but his emunah in Hashem too is worthless. He does not really have emunah in Hashem. It's words which are meaningless and worthless. It is impossible to believe in Hashem without simultaneously believing in tzaddik emes, in tzaddikim ritim. When he has both, then both are solid. If he has one alone, that one too is baseless. This is what the Arizal taught. This is what the R Nosson stated so clearly. The Holvein me'oid, understand very much, very carefully and very clearly that this is the basis of emunah. The frat in the darkness of this generation, time when it would seem practically everyone would say, where? How do you find a tzaddik emes? Where do you find one that is recognized by the whole world? There are so many conflicts. Each one says his Rebbe is the greatest, and all other Rebbes are worthless. And with so much dispute going on, dissension, how can you say that there is a tzaddik emes in the world? The answer, of course, is that there is more than one tzaddik in the world. There are many. A Jew is supposed to believe there are many and is supposed to respect, honor, have faith in all of them. There is, of course, one tzaddik emes. There must be one tzaddik emes, who is the root, the trunk of the tree from which all the other branches, other tzaddikim come from. But at least, if he believes in all these tzaddikim simultaneously, then he couples them together and is certain of having in that group the tzaddik emes. He believes in all tzaddikim without question. He will not attack or discredit any one of them. One who has that kind of emunah, Nosson says, is the key to finding the tzaddik emes. Because if you have a simple emunah in all tzaddikim, eventually you'll ferret out, you'll dig deeply enough to find out who the tzaddik emes is. Naturally, ashrei to that person who is zecher to find the true light of the tzaddik emes. And as we know, as we've been told, we've been taught, Nosson Zal's words that those who are close to Rabbeinu Zal, those are the tzadikim amitiyim of each generation till Mashiach comes. So that we are certain. When we say before our tefillah that we are mamin, we are mekasher ourselves to the tzadikim amitiyim shebedeleinu, we are speaking about those who are truly close to Rabbeinu Zal, part of Rabbeinu Zal, the leaders, the true leaders of this day. We should be zecher b'yemes to strengthen ourselves in this type of emunah, strengthen ourselves in our iskashrus to Rabbeinu Zal, to the tzadik yemes, and strengthen ourselves in our emunah to the tzadikim amitiyim of our generation. That is the true test. The true test to prove our faith in Rabbeinu Zal is by having faith in tzadikim of our generation too. And in the zechus of that type of emunah, which then proves our emunah in Hashem, and surely we will merit seeing with our eyes the Bias Gael Tzadik, Tzadik Emes of the future, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, the Simcha, the Binyan Beis HaMikdash, the Mapola of all the Seni Yisrael throughout the entire world, and the Gula Shlema and Yeshua Polis from Heda. Amen. Amen.